Welcome back, everyone, to episode 9 of the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am Jesse Collings, here as always with Jason Ounpraseuth. Jason, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. We're gonna talk about an exciting thing, very interesting thing that's going on in wrestling right now, and yeah, it feels good to be a wrestling fan right now, especially with everything going on. Not only just what we're talking about, but just a bunch of other things going on in wrestling.
Yeah, and you had you must have had a hard last 2 weeks quarantining in Japan, but it looks like you're good. You're out there. You're outside. You're at Tokyo Dome City right now. Uh,
That's
but
right. Just hanging out with everyone, all the Bullet Club guys.
all the Bullet Club guys that are in Japan, as opposed to all of the Bullet Club guys that are in the United States. But what we're talking about today is the New Japan and AEW relationship. And what I want to do today is I want to allow ourselves to get excited about this. I wrote an article last week kind of talking about the New Japan AEW relationship, and I was kind of stating like it's great right now, but with the pandemic and talent needing to quarantine, it's going to be a while before we see the real fruits of this relationship and see it reach its potential. Okada isn't going to wrestle Kenny Omega next month. Ibushi and Omega aren't going to main event the Tokyo Dome, tomorrow.
Mhm.
It's going to take some time, but I want to be excited about this. I want to allow us to fantasy book some things. I want us to have a discussion about what this could mean and all of the possibilities, without really maybe focusing on the immediate reality of this is just the first small little olive branch that's been extended between
Right.
these two companies. And there's a lot more that needs to happen and we need to see happen before we can, go full bore into this New Japan AEW mega card show. But I'll start with this question for you, Jason. When you first, whether you were watching live or saw it on social media, when you first saw Kenta come out on AEW Dynamite, what was your reaction?
My reaction was, holy fucking shit! Like, what the hell is going on? Like, Kenta just rolls it. And like even the main event, it was just going the way I expected it to. It was a fun
Mhm.
six man. Ray Phoenix was doing his thing, and like, oh, okay, that's how the show is gonna end. Just a crazy schmoz between like all the regular things that going on in AEW. But then Kenta shows up, and then obviously your mind fills up with like, oh my god, they're building the NJPW strong match is coming up later in the month. Like it's just so like I was watching it live and I just could not believe what's happening in front of my TV.
Yes, I saw it live as well, and my jaw dropped like I was a cartoon character. I was literally just like, for like 25 seconds. When he comes out right at the end of the match, and he's wearing a hood, he's wearing a mask, a face mask,
Right.
and you're like, oh, who's this guy? And I just kind of assume it's somebody that's on the roster. Maybe it's somebody that's was been gone off TV for a while and has come back.
Hmm.
I don't, or it could be a new wrestler. I just kind of I wasn't expecting it to be Kenta, even though it kind of had been teased a lot. And in fact, John Moxley and Kenta had kind of squared off on an episode of New Japan Strong, I think a week
Right.
before.
Hmm.
So we kind of knew that and we knew they were building a match between these two. But when he took off, the mask and the hood, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Kenta! And my reaction was like, again, like my mouth was agape, and I'm like, oh, this. And it's those kind of moments are why we're wrestling fans.
Yeah.
Uh, I think a lot of the times promotions rely too much on surprises and people, building up a surprise or hyping a surprise or who's a mystery man or who's a debut. But when you do get those kind of moments and those surprises, and all you want to do, I guess this is a symptom of being a modern wrestling fan, but all I wanted to do after that show was over was to go online, go on social media, and just talk about it, see what other people are saying about it,
Right.
watch it again on YouTube, watch it on Twitter.
Hmm.
Uh, just I spent like an hour, um, like afterwards, just like browsing around social media, just looking at what people are saying about it. It gets you so energized, it gets you so hyped.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's what kind of those moments that I think are really paramount to why we're watching wrestling each week.
Yeah.
And we
100.
like, yeah, we like seeing stories that are told, very well week after week, and we like seeing good matches. But that kind of surprise, and that kind of, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening. makes it feel special, and there's really uh, nothing else like it that captures that kind of imagination, like
Hmm.
uh, that kind of moment.
Yeah, for sure. And like I think the best part about it was there was no reporting done by it. There was no like, oh, there's gonna be a big surprise coming up. Yeah, the article says spoiler alert. This is gonna happen. Like really seen anything like that. And so that's probably the best part about it is that like there was no leak. No one knew it was happening. There's no person taking a photo. It's like, oh, I see Kenta. He's rolling up into Daly's place. We didn't see that, and so that's why it was a genuine surprise. It wasn't like, oh, like there's rumors Edge is coming back to the Royal Rumble. He might not. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. And even Kenta, like he was always teasing something, but it was always like, oh, most of the time it was nothing. But he teased
Mhm.
something early in the morning, and I think everyone assumed it was nothing, but he delivered on it. But still, like it wasn't like that much of a spoiler of him appearing on the show. And that's what made it the best part about it.
Yeah, that's a good point about Kent. Kenta's social media game is like 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
For especially for a guy who English is not his first language, he gets social media better than 99% of other wrestlers.
hmm,
And you're right, he'd been teasing stuff, and but most of it was BS, and it was kind of that was kind of his character, was he just kind of
yeah.
talked shit on Twitter, and you didn't really believe that it was going to happen. And yeah, you didn't get any hype about it. We didn't hear any rumors online. We didn't hear, like, they didn't say who will be the mystery tag team partner or who will be the 21st man in the battle royal. There was none of that. It was that genuine kind of surprise. But more than just Kenta showing up is, to me, the key here is the New Japan and AEW relationship outside of that. Kenta is just, he's just Scott Hall walking onto the set of Nitro.
Sure.
It's
Hmm.
not the formation of the NWO. What we're going to see, hopefully soon, or in the relative future, is more of an AEW in New Japan Pro Wrestling working relationship. What do
Hmm.
you think? What is like the number one thing you want to see between these two groups? Whether it's a match
Uh,
or just a shared a talent exchange, what is kind of like the number one thing you'd want to see?
I mean, I think the big thing for me is that I don't want this to be like an every week type of thing. Like I want these things to feel special in that sort of way. And so I think an occasional super show, whether it be biannual or just an annual super show, would be really cool. And an occasional talent exchange, not just outright, oh, we're gonna send 10 guys over here, we're gonna send 10 guys over there. Just like an occasional one, sort of like what they're doing with Impact right now, like private parties there, and they're doing their thing. And so that would be kind of cool they like, oh, we're gonna send one act over here, and then they're gonna be sort of this invading type of force. And so I think that'd be really cool, just in terms of just a big general type of thing. AEW and New Japan, because obviously if you do this like all the time and like, oh, like you just keep the shows together, it gets a bit too much. You don't want to feel like you have to do homework, so to speak. Like I think that's one of the big things with like whenever like an adaptation of a movie comes out, and like you don't want to feel like you have to read the book, understand what's going on. You don't have to watch every single like you don't have to watch Dark or every
Mm-hmm.
New Japan show. Like you want to make these things feel special. You want to do it on the big shows. You don't want to just do it on a mundane sort of Dynamite. You want to do it on the big Dynamite shows.
Yeah, I'm not interested at all in something like a AEW versus New Japan feud, where like
Yeah,
you have this
exactly.
pay-per-view and it's all matches and you keep a score like it's Survivor Series or something. I
Hmm.
have no interest in that. I don't think a lot of fans, I think on paper it seems like an idea that maybe fans would like, but I personally am not interested in like supporting a brand supremacy or
Hmm.
hoping my AEW guys beat those New Japan guys or vice versa. I'm not
Exactly.
I don't I like the idea of it just being a big match here and there. And you're right, you can't do it all the time. You want to be able to make it feel special. At the same time, I am interested in seeing a lot of talent exchanges. I would be interested in seeing tours on both sides. Obviously, the
Sure.
way New Japan's scheduling is, it's more practical to send someone over there for 14 shows over the course of, 2 months,
Hmm.
as opposed to in on AEW's end, you're asking for maybe 6 or 8 weeks or 12 weeks or 14 weeks of a commitment to really build somebody up and hype up a match. You can't just, you could fly Okada in um, for like one show, fly him in for a Saturday pay-per-view, and then he just goes home and you can kind of hype it using videos and stuff like that. But to me, like if you want to do an Ibushi versus Omega feud and you want to do that right,
Mm-hmm.
those guys are going to have to be with each other for, I don't know, 6 months or at least 2 months or something like that. We need to
Yeah.
really see the story evolve. You can't just be like, okay, Omega and Ibushi, we're doing it. Buy the pay-per-view Saturday. It, and obviously with the pandemic going on, that's going to take some time. You're not going to be able to have that kind of quick travel. New Japan does have a large amount of talent that is based in the United States. Kenta is one of them, and Kenta's based in Florida, which is why we didn't see Kenta at the airport. Like, oh, where's Kenta going? Kenta's getting a flight to Jacksonville. Those kind of things that pop up on a Friday before the Royal Rumble. And that's key because you can, if talent is in the United States, they're not currently on tour with New Japan like Kenta is. There's no reason why they can't show up in Jacksonville. There's no reason Gorillas of Destiny won't appear on an AEW show soon. There's no reason that Jay White, who I believe also lives in Florida, uh, could show up or anything like that. Any of the American-based talent. So that's definitely one thing. Something that I think is interesting discussion regarding this, particularly with Kenta's debut. So Kenta comes out, and Excalibur kind of like explodes with this word dialogue to explain who Kenta is, and he's like, "That's Kenta. That's New Japan Pro Wrestling's Kenta. He is number one contender for John Moxley's IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship. He's the man with the briefcase." And I mean, you and I know what that means. We actually don't even
Yeah.
need it to be explained to us. For
Mm-hmm.
viewers who are AEW fans but not New Japan fans, which is a sizable amount, I know there are a lot of people who are, or at least understand who Kenta is. Do you think there's a hurdle at all that could be detrimental for AEW when it comes to putting these guys who are not very well known to American audiences to the degree that the established AEW talent or former WWE talent is, and are you worried at all about a learning curve, I guess, in the ability for people to understand like how big of a deal Okada is if they're not New Japan
Mm-hmm.
viewers?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a hurdle that they're probably talked about right now, Tony Khan and everyone else, all the EVPs and such. And yeah, I think that it's obviously the job of commentary, but yeah, you don't want to do like what you just talked about. You don't want to do a word blurb of everything that they've ever done because that's not very effective. I mean, New Japan's production value, they're really good at producing videos. Like videos are very well produced. I guess the problem getting people to watch those, and they don't really show them on Dynamite too often as well. Like they don't really show all these videos that they put out. And they're expecting their fans to watch it, and AEW is very loyal in terms of watching AEW stuff. But yeah, it's something to think about. It's kind of an interesting sort of pivot for AEW to cater to the hardcore fans because obviously the hardcore fans they know everything about wrestling, AEW, Impact, New Japan, all that. And I think it's kind of an interesting pivot to go to the hardcore fans right now. And you look at WWE, what they're doing with Bad, all the other celebrities that they're doing, they kind of just came to the casual fans right now. With all these big celebrity appearances, and AEW is going the opposite direction, going to the hardcore fans and sort of expecting a lot of people to understand what's happening right now. And so, maybe they're banking on sort of what you talked about before, where we were expecting wrestling fans to go on the internet and sort of see all this Twitter reaction, and you see these things trending on Twitter. People start trying to figure out and understand what's happening. And so maybe that's the gamble that they're taking. It's obviously a gamble because, it's obviously could not work. And I guess that could be reflected in the TV ratings perhaps. And, it's something they have to look at, all the quarter hours and all that, see how
Mhm.
well each segment produces. And so I think it's something to monitor, but I don't expect it to be that big of a hurdle for the hardcore fan. But the casuals, it's still a wait and see because obviously, like I haven't checked out the quarter hours from all the segments, but still, like I think it will take a huge learning curve, but I'm very confident AEW with their production value and everything else that they can get this through.
Yeah, so like the thing with like so Moxley, they never acknowledged that Moxley was the IWGP US Heavyweight Champion.
Mm-hmm.
They might have actually before. There might have been something mentioned on commentary. So, but he didn't have the title or anything like that. It was something that was not talked about regularly on Dynamite. And so I do think it does raise questions about, okay, he's got this title now. He had it on the show. How come we haven't seen it before? What is this title's relevance? If you're not a New Japan fan, you wouldn't know those things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do think that there's a lot of projection that comes from people like you and I who are hardcore fans that are like, oh, the casual fans won't understand this.
Sure.
And I do think that can be overstated. I think that people have the capacity to learn and to
Mm-hmm.
understand, and they can say, I might not know who Kenta is, and I might not know why Moxley has this title, but I don't know if that is going to make people turn off the television. I think it's more likely it's going to, if people enjoy AEW's product already, they're going to be like, huh, I should kind of maybe learn more about this, or just, oh, I'm excited for this new story that's being told. It's not necessarily people going to be like, I have no idea what's going on, click, which I think is sometimes talked about when it comes to I think when it comes to the learning curve, like I agree from a business perspective, right? That New Japan, there aren't hundreds of thousands of American residents who are New Japan Pro Wrestling fans that are not watching AEW Dynamite. I think I
Mm-hmm.
can really prove that, but I'm pretty sure it's a pretty solid fact that there's not like this huge
Sure.
audience of New Japan fans that don't watch AEW that will now watch AEW. There certainly are some people who maybe
Mm-hmm.
didn't really like AEW that much, but are still hardcore New Japan fans and say, maybe I'll tune this in because now some of my guys are on here. But that's a very small percentage. So I didn't expect there to be like a million people watching AEW this week, uh, following up that kind of angle and Kenta in the match. But I think you mentioned something important, which is that kind of buzz online where people just suddenly start talking about it. That even if you didn't watch Dynamite, you might see like, oh, Kenta's trending. Oh, what's this? And seeing people excited about an angle makes you more interested in seeing it. I know I don't watch Raw every week, but if I'm kind of on Twitter and someone's like, "Oh, this Raw angle with this angle was great. This segment was great." I'm definitely going to seek it out and see it because I like watching things that are good, and when a lot of people are saying something is good, I will go and watch it. And I think most humans
Mm-hmm.
operate like that. So I do think that from that end, there is kind of a wave of positivity that can come from the established fan base that can trickle down to maybe more casual, not weekly viewers of Dynamite. And even so, I like obviously maybe people don't maybe like I'll just use like the 3 million WWE fans that are out there that watch Raw and SmackDown or whatever. I know there's not 3 million anymore, but just to use a number that's much bigger than AEW's current fan base, I would say that those people might not be like Okada fans or have watched a lot of Okada matches,
Mm-hmm.
but I would assume that maybe 2/3 of them know who Okada is just by proxy of being a wrestling fan and being on the internet. That if like Okada showed up on AEW Dynamite, even if you had never watched New Japan before in your life, you would be able to know like, oh yeah, I know that guy is a big deal, or I know that guy is a star, and all these people online are reacting to him like a star. Maybe I should tune in because this seems like a big deal, even if I don't know who these people are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, again, this is sort of like the job of commentary
It
to
is.
really sell these guys over. And like, I guess just use like movies as an example. Like you look at Marvel, they've introduced all these obscure characters, but then they become like like really popular characters, like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a very obscure comic book for people who don't read
Yeah.
comics. Like no one cares who they are, but now they're the biggest people in the Marvel MCU. And so I think all the commentary has to really tell that these are very important people and they have to be involved in important segments as well. Like you can't have Okada show up feuding with I don't know, Peter Avalon, just an
Yes.
example. Like he's feuding Peter Avalon. Like that's not making him important. Yeah, presenting him as, no offense to Peter Avalon, he's an enhancement talent. Like, you don't want to present Okada as an enhancement guy. He's a main event level guy. He has to be with, the Bucks or Jericho or MJF, Jungle Boy, whoever. He has to be in front of a big AEW, really present him as important. So that's very important in terms of like behind the scenes stuff, like commentary and booking and all that.
Yes, Kenta did not run out and beat up Marco Stunt. He ran out and beat Jon Moxley. Yeah, and it's a good point. I think like so much of so there's a lot of lessons that people can learn in wrestling from like the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe when it comes to things like introducing talents like you mentioned, like Guardians of the Galaxy, right? I believe like the comic books, I think are like they were written in at least the 21st century. I think they might have even started like I don't know, like in like the mid 2000s, like when they first started getting published. I don't know.
They're in they were actually in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, that's how much people don't know about them. Like they didn't sell that well in the 90s.
Maybe I'm just looking at maybe one of the characters is relatively new. But the point is that like Guardians of the Galaxy were a very obscure group of superheroes, and right now they are more financially relevant than like Superman, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, because they've been pushed, they've been booked correctly, they've been put over. They're marketed appropriately. They get their characters over on screen. All of these things that you could take from wrestling, you could use for that. And it's a good point. I think when I was a kid, there was an angle that people will remember, which was on an episode of SmackDown when Batista was World Heavyweight Champion. Mark Henry came out after not being on this product for I think a few years, and he beat up Batista. I think it was a cage match, and Mark Henry like ripped off the door of the cage and then like beat up Batista and injured Batista badly, and SmackDown went off the air. I think I was 10 years old at the time, and I did not know who Mark Henry was. I had not watched WWE previously to that. I had never heard of this guy before, but all I saw was this enormous man rip off the cage of a steel, rip off the door of a steel cage and beat up Batista. In that entire week, I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe that guy's huge and he beat up Batista. What the hell is going on? And I was like, definitely tuning in next week to see what would happen because I was mesmerized by this guy. And I didn't know who this guy was. All I knew was that the announcers were like, oh my God, it's Mark Henry, Mark Henry, Mark Henry, similar to how the announcers were talking about Kenta. And I was like, I don't know, I gotta watch this guy. Like, it captured my imagination, and I wasn't like, oh, I don't know who this guy is. Click, I'm not watching this again. It was, oh my God, I'm curious to see what they're gonna do with this guy because I've never seen him before. And that's just a personal example, but I think a lot of people that when they got into wrestling and didn't know everything about wrestling, you're kind of intrigued. I think there's more recent examples, like when Braun Strowman showed up, everyone was like, who is this guy? Because, he wasn't featured in NXT, so he was just this giant guy that was in the Wyatt family. I don't think people turned off the television because they're like, I don't know who this new character is. Click. I'm interested in seeing what this guy is. And I think wrestling fans have the capacity to learn, and it's the job of commentary to put those guys over. I think it was kind of a lot when Kenta debuted because you're not just introducing Kenta, you're talking about this title that Jon Moxley has, but I don't think that's turning viewers away. Ultimately.
Yeah, I think they did a good job during the entrances of the when we're recording this, the last Dynamite show on the Falls Count Anywhere match. They kind of did introducing like all the scenarios going on. They the U.S. title, calling it prestigious, which is kind of funny. Like God, title prestigious, but still, like, they're putting it over, and they of introducing everyone in the match. I thought they did a decent job, at least in that one example.
Yeah. So moving beyond just Kenta right now, one thing that I like a lot about just the AEW New Japan relationship and AEW's relationship in general, their relationships with Impact, their relationships with the NWA. We're taught as wrestling fans almost to become wrapped up in this like partisan rivalry between different promotions. Obviously you can go back to the Monday Night War. People like the idea of, yeah, I'm a WWF guy. Fuck WCW. And in WCW, I'm a WCW guy. Fuck WWF. And ECW fans saying, fuck both of you. I'm an ECW guy. And people like that. It's like rooting for your sports team. You guys have a rival, all of that stuff. But in the 21st century, like wrestling fans and they were in the 90s. There were fans that watched all three things. I'm not saying they were simpletons back then or anything, but wrestling fans are cosmopolitan, especially I would consider the non-WWE fan base, that we don't feel like uh, we only watch AEW. It's all I care about. Every other wrestling company can screw off. We like AEW, we like Impact, we like New Japan, we like Ring of Honor, whatever. Maybe not everyone likes all of those things, but you like other promotions and you have an open mind. But historically, we've just seen these rivalries and these companies not acknowledging each other and, or burying them subtly on their shows or not subtly on their shows. But it's nice to be in an environment where AEW can acknowledge that this other wrestling promotion is important, that it's valuable, their stars are good wrestlers, and we're going to work together and produce a product that you should be excited about. You should be excited about, Serena Deeb defending her NWA Women's Championship. You should be excited about the Good Brothers coming over and wrestling in AEW. You should be excited about Kenta coming in. You shouldn't be afraid of these other wrestling organizations. You shouldn't be annoyed that they're pushing other products. You should be excited because wrestling fans like more than one wrestling promotion. And it's just a different vibe and environment that I find very refreshing and just very mature and adult, as opposed to being in this petty squabbles where we just plant our flags and refuse to acknowledge other wrestling's existence.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that's part of today's sort of culture, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, when a big show comes out, you don't want to be that one person that's like, oh, I don't watch that show.
Or you do
I'm
want to
too
be
cool
that
for that.
person.
Like, no.
You want to be a
Yeah,
troll on
exactly.
Twitter.
Oh yeah, sure. You want to be that way, but
Yeah.
like I mean, exactly. There's like people who they do get in that partisanship between AEW and NXT. They always care about the ratings. Like, oh, AEW did better numbers. Like, oh, the numbers don't really
Yeah.
matter if you're an NXT fan. But still, like most people, they don't care about that. Like even
Yes.
then, like the ratings, they're just fun to talk about. They're just fun to analyze. Like I don't
Yeah.
really get into it that
They're
much.
good to indicate certain trends, like if something might at a quarter hour or an angle might be drawing,
Hmm.
or long-standing trends. And I personally find the ratings kind of fascinating on that end, but I'm not like, yes, I prefer AEW's product to NXT, like as a viewer, and I watch AEW and I don't watch
Sure.
NXT live. But I'm never
Mhm.
like, yeah, AEW crushed NXT. You're in the mud.
Yeah,
And
like
this,
no one, no real fan cares about that. Like only like the partisan people
yes,
care about. And like, there's also just like a fear of missing out as well, Like if something cool is happening, you don't want to you want to know what's happening. You want all that information. And I think that's where we're the age we're living in right now. Like, you just want more information and you want to know more about what's going on in wrestling. You don't want, feel like, oh, wait, is that a reference thing? Oh, I gotta look this up, especially with the Bucks and the way they do things. They always reference stuff. And so you always want to feel like, you want to understand those references. You want to feel like, oh, I knew what that means. Like, oh, they did this, into that, and so that's why they're doing it now, and all that crazy stuff.
yeah. I mean, the fear of missing out is basically what motivates me to be around to watch as much wrestling as I tend to do. I mean, uh, I participated in the Voices of Wrestling Top 100 Matches of 2020 list, and I know you
Hmm.
did as well, Jason. People want to check that out. It's on the voicesofwrestling.com website, just a collection of different wrestling media people giving their top 10 lists. It could be any promotion, any match that took place in 2020, and just everyone ranks their top 10 and they add up the votes. And it's a great list. You won't find a more diverse list of different wrestling promotions and different fans' opinions being represented. But on that list, there was like a ton of Joshi matches from a bunch of different Joshi promotions. And I was like, oh man, I gotta watch a lot more Joshi because it looks like they're killing it because there's so many of these matches and I don't know who these people are. And I'm like, last night I was like looking up Tokyo Joshi Pro's YouTube page because I'm like, I wonder if there's any matches from this year that I can watch like real quick. And that's what it is like you want to learn more. I'm personally a curious wrestling fan. I want to know more about that kind of stuff, and I like to think that there's a lot of people out there that never felt like they had to watch New Japan or wanted to watch New Japan are now like, oh, like now they're getting involved in AEW promotion that I do like. Maybe I'll check them out. I'm sure New Japan is banking on that because I think it's a big win for New Japan to get these guys on a strong cable show like Dynamite is.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like, you know, also we're talking from a fan perspective, like from a wrestler perspective. I guess the only worry is that like you're missing out on a spot or whatever, and like especially for the younger wrestlers, like it's all about that development, and you need
Hmm.
matches to develop. You can watch as much wrestling and learn as much information as you can, but you have to go out there and actually wrestle to actually learn how to wrestle. And so I
Yes.
think that's the only worry from wrestlers' perspective. And but obviously this partner and all these other partnerships, maybe that can help. You send your younger wrestlers over to other promotions, like New Japan does with excursions. Maybe you could do something like that, perhaps. Um, Obviously, very fluid and very early, but still, that's a potential for the younger wrestlers who, they're probably not going to be on TV as often when these big things happen because you don't want to put out your green guys on these other experienced and big angles.
Yeah, so that's actually a key thing for me with this takeaway is obviously we can talk about an Omega Ibushi match, or we can talk about, Shingo Takagi wrestling Eddie Kingston, or John, Pac versus Will Ospreay, or these kind of matches that um, are, dream matches and these big matches that I think everyone understands would be a big deal if they were to take place. To me, as a nerd, um, almost as interesting, if not more interesting, is the talent exchange in the excursions, in the kind of the what young talent can get out of this feud. You make a good point, Jason, about like spots are going to be taken up. It's same like the way WWE will bring back a part time star, and like Edge wins the Royal Rumble. Edge is going to get the WrestleMania main event spot. That's if he wasn't
Hmm.
there, it would go to a younger wrestler, and maybe long term it's a better decision to have that younger wrestler get that spot. And same thing would happen if Okada came over and wrestled a pay per view match against Chris Jericho. But I'm really interested, again, once the pandemic, hopefully the travel restrictions around the pandemic at least kind of die down. I'm really interested in seeing what both sides can get out of a talent exchange when it comes to particularly young talent. New Japan obviously has the excursion program where they send their young lions, their young boys, out to different wrestling promotions, oftentimes to Mexico or the UK. A few times they've been sent to Ring of Honor. Jay White was in Ring of Honor. Evil was
Hmm.
in Ring of Honor. So they're open to sending guys to America. I'd be really interested if I was New Japan. I'd definitely be interested in getting. I know Ren Narita, I think, is in the United States, or at least he's in Mexico because he's appeared on the New Japan Strong shows. But
Yeah.
as an example, I'd be really interested in seeing Ren Narita go down to Jacksonville and work a match on Dark because there's tons of good talent that he can learn a lot from working with, even if he's working with a guy like Christopher Daniels or Sean Spears, maybe not a top star, but veteran wrestlers that can help him learn, and that's why you send guys on excursions. I think that the American young lions that they have, like Alex Coughlin and Clark Connors and Carl Fredericks, even though I think Carl Fredericks is technically not a young lion anymore. But those are guys that I think they should be in Jacksonville right now, wrestling on Dark. Put them in a tag match on Dynamite. I'd tune in. I'd be more interested in seeing those guys on AEW. Why not? I think that's a big advantage for them. And then on the flip side, well, I'll hold it right there. Do you have any ideas about like New Japan talent coming over to the United States?
Well, I think just the one thing what I have about issues with the AEW is that like all their ancillary stuff with outside Dynamite, it's like they handle it in a very weird sort of way. Like Dark, like yeah, it's an important experience for wrestlers to get on Dark, but like, do you have to watch it? That's sort of the thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it doesn't feel like watchable program. But at the same time, like storylines come out of Dark and they do go on Dynamite. Like the Peter Avalon Lee Johnson feud, that's all on AEW Dark, and then like that give more satisfying that if you actually watch Dark. Otherwise, Peter Avalon's just a guy that's sort of out there on Dynamite, and so like putting your New Japan talent into a program they're just there to learn, but still, like for AEW, like that's even more selling of like explaining why these people are here, and still like if they're on Dark, do you have to explain? And like even if they are, if you don't, what's the point of having them on from a business perspective at least? From a creative side, that that's a different side, but from a business perspective, I'm very curious of why they sort of want to do that for the sort of experienced talents.
Well, I think for AEW's perspective, yeah, like AEW is not going to benefit tremendously from Ren Narita working a dark match.
Hmm.
But I think it's this is a working relationship. So you're doing New Japan a favor by getting having Ren Narita come in, maybe even paying to fly him in and have him wrestle Christopher Daniels or someone like that. In turn, New Japan's going to perform a favor for you, and I think AEW has a lot of young talents. They have a ridiculous amount of talents, really, in their 20s. And I think every single one of them could benefit from going over to New Japan and working a tour. And it's a very disciplined style. It's a different style than AEW, which is I'm not saying anything's better or worse. It's just different, and it's good for talent like that to learn in the New Japan system. It's a proven system for developing talent and churning out good wrestlers. And that's almost where I am the most interested in seeing. As interested as I am in things like, Okada coming over and having a big match in America, I'm almost equally interested in things like seeing Jungle Boy go work the Best of the Super Juniors, or seeing Private Party, in the junior tag team division, or seeing MJF in the G1, which sounds insane, but would that'd be great for MJF if he was in the G1. And
Yeah,
like
for
those
sure.
post G1 promos, like you're not watching, like I'm not waking up at 4:30 in the morning to see those. There's just so much you can do from a talent development standpoint that gets me as excited as a fan, and in the long term would prove fruitful from a business perspective. I don't know if putting Okada and Omega uh, on a pay-per-view show is really going to bump up a huge pay-per-view rating for AEW. But long term, getting that young talent and putting them in a very strong learning environment, an environment where they will learn a lot, that's a real long-term investment that can help you financially long-term. MJF will be a better performer if he goes over to New Japan for a few months. In my opinion, it might not obviously happen, but I think that there's the benefit for that. And that is where you're going to see your long-term gain and eventually, hopefully, aid your business growth by having more experienced, more intelligent, just overall better talent at the top of your card that you've developed. And I think that's a key aspect to New Japan and AEW's relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, you're just sort of banking on the fans also investing as well. You want, if guys like the AEW guys do go over to New Japan sort of programming, you hope that you get more subscribers, you get more people buying, merch, or you hope that, those people are still invested in talents to actually watch your product as well. And I think there's a high probability they will be invested because AEW because have also been developed and Dynamite as well. But yeah, still there's also variables where like maybe they're not interested in watching other things outside of AEW, but still it's still all wait and see. But yeah, I do agree. Possibilities of adding more depth to these tournaments for New Japan at least is very attractive. You want more depth, you have more stories, and that's the best part for New Japan. The way they pick their feuds, especially foreign talent, is like sort of um, keeping the Japanese talent separate for feuds. Like using AJ Styles as an example, when he was in New Japan, when he won the title, his best asset was uh, putting space between the Okada Tanahashi feud. He could be the filler matches for them,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a effective way to use AJ Styles. And I think that can be an effective way to use the foreign talent in AEW. You don't want Hiromu feuding with, Naito, whoever, or whatever person he's feuding with. You just put in Jungle Boy as a proxy, as a filler feud for him, and that makes still produce great matches. And yeah, that could be great for their booking plans as well, since New Japan does like the long term booking.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot, Jason. Something I didn't think about. But you're right. New Japan in particular, I think in AEW, they both kind of are in a similar situation. New Japan more because they've been around for a lot longer, but they do kind of have when you have this upper tier of top talent, they kind of end up feuding with each other a lot, right? It's
Mm.
Okada is feuding with has feuded with Tanahashi, or he's feuding with Naito, or he's feuding with Ibushi, and it's just these kind of same talents at the very top. You brought in a guy like AJ Styles, and he breaks up that kind of I don't want to call it monotony because it's not boring, but it really helps give space. So
Right.
AJ Styles and Okada can have this thing for a year, or AJ Styles and Tanahashi can have this thing for a year, and it prevents just you from doing the same matches over and over again. I think New Japan, AEW is in a similar situation where You have Omega, you have Moxley, you have Jericho, you have Cody, you have maybe Hangman. You can't just rely on those guys working all of the big singles matches. You got to mix it up with uh, different talent. Otherwise, it's going to become redundant, especially if those are the same guys who are on top year after year, which they're going to be. And so, yeah, bringing in, so like, okay, let's look at Omega's probably going to have like a year-long title reign. Who's his opponent for the pay-per-view in May? It looks like they're going to do this. I assume they're going to do uh, Moxley versus Omega again at Revolution, and I think Omega's going to win that match. Okay, who's his opponent for May? Is it going to be? You can do Jericho again. It can't be Cody. Apparently, it can't be Cody because he's got the stipulation, and they're really serious about it. That's when you can bring in an Okada and just say, look, these are the guys who sparked a wrestling boom by the sheer quality, the sheer epic awesomeness of their matches, by sheer quality. Kenny Omega became a star because it was just this match that everyone was talking about, and they're gonna like that's something you can do, and it can break that up. And consequently, you can bring in Omega. Like, if you want to do who's going to main event the Tokyo Dome next year, you really don't have an enormous amount of options if you're New Japan for like credible main eventers, right? At this stage, they could always build someone up, but you're looking at, say, Ibushi still has the title at the Tokyo Dome. Who is he defending against? Is he going to defend it against Tanahashi? Already seen that match. All right, is he going to send it against Okada? We already saw that match at last year's Tokyo Dome. Jay White, we already saw that match at the Tokyo Dome. Tetsuya Naito, all of these kind of matches we've already seen. Could you bring in Omega?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a new. They've wrestled before in their careers, but that's a new match. And that's a big match. And that's the kind of match you'd be like, I'm intrigued. You could even bring in Jericho and do Ibushi versus Jericho.
Sure.
That's a new match. So there's all these things that having that kind of big name talent you can bring in that immediately has championship credibility and feels like a big match is a key aspect to this relationship.
Yeah, and it also helps build up guys as well, because I think you could disagree with me or not, but I think the plan is for Hangman to eventually build his way up into beating Omega.
Yes, I agree.
And, yeah, but the thing he's doing right now, it's very mid card esque to me. He's not really doing. He's not.
He's kind of in a
card.
He's kind of in a cooler feud.
Yeah, exactly. With him feuding against other big guys, even guys like Ishii or Goto, I think those guys are more credible than the Dark Order guys right now. There's with what he's doing with Matt Hardy as well. I think him feuding and building up against other credible challengers really built him up as this big sort of star. And again, maybe this is a cooler feud, and maybe he'll feud against someone else, maybe a Jericho perhaps, to try to build him up. But still, with him feuding with other championship level talents, other up and comers, that can really help build up a Hangman. So eventually, when you finally get to that Omega match, whenever they're going to do it in a year from now, it will feel really big for him to finally win that title and just dethrone Omega.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that Hangman's going to beat Omega for the title, and I think it's probably something that could happen. I would say, at this point, probably November at the earliest.
Yeah.
I think it's Omega's long dominant reign, and Page is the babyface that's going to eventually beat him. And it's a challenge when it comes to booking that kind of stuff, because you want to keep Page on television, but you can only have him, feud so much with. It can't just be hot feud, because you'll burn out your feuds that way. So you do kind of have to have a back burner feud, and does feel like he's kind of taking a step back, right? He's in a mid card feud. He's gonna probably end up wrestling Matt Hardy. Perhaps at the pay-per-view or something like that. But at the end of the day, I don't really see anything wrong with that, because Matt Hardy's a guy that has name value that Page can beat credible, convincingly, and it gives him something to do. But yeah, you're right. If he could beat Ishii or Goto. I think he was Page was the guy who was a very, very much a mid-card guy in Ring of Honor. Was not a main event feud talent in Ring of Honor, and then he fell in with the elite guys, which helped obviously his career a ton. But he worked at 1G1, where I think he went 4-5 in the G1, or maybe even worse than that. But when he came out of that, everyone was like, this guy's going to be a potential big star in the wrestling industry. So by the time AEW started, everyone's like, oh, Hangman Page is a main event talent. It's like not
Mhm.
even disputable. So that's a big jump for him, and that's just the kind of gain he saw from just working in New Japan. And like, okay, he's gonna have a 15-minute match with Tanahashi, and he's not gonna win, but he's gonna look like a star. And that's what we're hoping to gain out of that. And that's like I think that kind of can benefit any one of these guys in AEW going over and working a tour at New Japan. One of the other things I look at is I look at New Japan's weaknesses, and I think that there's talent in AEW that can really help those weaknesses. I think looking at the tag team division in New Japan, it's not good. It's basically Gorillas of Destiny and Dangerous Tekkers, Zack Sabre Jr. and Taichi, just wrestling an endless series of matches against one another. And I know they just had a 30-minute match at the New Beginning in Hiroshima and DQ, so we're gonna have another one of those matches. And I know the Gorillas of Destiny did not end the elite did not leave New Japan on the best of terms with the Gorillas of Destiny. But if
Mhm.
I'm God, I am looking at New Japan or AEW's tag team division, and I am uh, salivating at the idea of working with any of these guys because AEW has such a deep tag team division that you could put like 7 or 8 tag teams over into from AEW into New Japan, and they'd immediately feel like big matches. You could do obviously you could do the Young Bucks, which would be the biggest match they could do, but you could do God versus FTR. You could do God versus Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy. You could do God versus the Lucha Brothers. You could do God versus the Butcher and the Blade. And all of those matches, in my opinion, will be better than any of the prospective matches that they have right now in New Japan when it comes to tag team wrestling, because it's just not a very well fleshed out division. And AEW can help in that regard. I think you can say the same thing about the junior tag team division because you have tons of tag teams in AEW that would qualify as junior tag teams, and I think it would help a lot in the junior heavyweight division where I think they've run into some redundancies with you have a few top talent. You obviously have Hiromu's the anchor of the division. He's wrestled Ishimori a ton of times. He just beat Show. He's wrestling ELP again. There's pick your name from AEW that could go over there. It could be Pac, who obviously has a lot of experience wrestling in Japan with Dragon Gate. It could be Jungle Boy. It could be Darby Allin. It could be any of these names that would feel like a big fresh match.
Yeah, for sure. And like, even with God, they don't have to feud with Young Bucks, like you said. There's plenty of other teams they can feud with other than the Young Bucks. And like I think for like I guess on that topic, like like all that Bullet Club stuff, I think they should really stay away from that. From especially with the other Bullet Club guys, I think they should just really wait on that and just like the other AEW talent, other than like non Bullet Club stuff. You still have
Mm-hmm.
Santana Ortiz, have a bunch of other tag teams that they can feud with. If we either get God, Dangerous Tekkers, whoever, they can still feud with other guys outside of just the main event like Bullet Club sort of guys. And so yeah, like obviously the junior division, you know they're trying to build up talent, with Master Wato. He's being built up right now, coming from Excursion, but still, it's going to take a while for him to really be a credible guy. And so, yeah, it's good to have guys like, yeah, like you said, Jungle Boy, Darby Allin come in. And, I guess I'm curious about that too, as well. Do guys, Darby Allin, Jungle Boy, especially Jungle Boy, I think, he can sort of do some logic leaps of him being a heavyweight. I don't know if he wants to do that because yeah, like with New Japan for a long time, they haven't really the junior division that often. Like you said, the junior tag division especially, they have not viewed at all. And so
No,
I'm very
it's
curious to see. Yeah, go ahead.
no, it's like the junior tag division is just like this, opening match kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And it's basically here are some junior heavyweights that we don't have in the title picture right now, and they're going to be a tag team. It's kind of how WWE approaches its regular tag team division.
Hmm.
It's just like, here's some guys to throw them together. And AEW's done a better job of building their tag team division than basically any wrestling promotion in history that I can remember. I guess like Dragon Gate and stuff, they have like endless amount of tag team combinations and stuff. But AEW just has a ton of tag teams. Like even a team like Butcher and the Blade, who are like a very mid card tag team in AEW. If those guys went to New Japan and wrestled Gorillas of Destiny, I would be pretty intrigued by that because I haven't seen them I know they're pretty good, and I haven't seen them in New Japan before, and I think that it would be interesting if they wrestled this like, wild brawling match with the Guerrillas of Destiny. I think it would work. And that's just like like literally a random, grab bag team that a name you pull out of the hat when it comes to AEW's tag team division. I mean, looking at, so, go ahead. I'm gonna look something up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's just like obviously a ton of combinations they can pull out for just anything in general, and yeah, obviously, it all depends on how audiences react. Whether these guys can be over in Japan as well, because obviously, not every foreign talent is over in New Japan.
No,
They can be over. They
Cody.
can be over in America, but not in Japan.
Yeah, well, I think that's a key. That is a key point because, um, look, there's talent in AEW that's really over in Japan. Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho were top guys in New Japan before they left. So obviously those guys have instant star power whenever they were to return. But obviously even someone like one of the weird things about Cody was that Cody really wasn't over in Japan. He was, but he was very much like a mid-card guy when he'd wrestle in New Japan. He was not even close to the level of Omega when it came to star power. If you were to watch AEW television, Cody's a huge star, and he was a huge star in America, but it never really, translated to Japan. He didn't have a history working in Japan. He didn't, he'd just kind of be there here and there, but didn't really, like, he was way more over in America than he was in Japan, as opposed to Omega, where it was kind of like a 50-50 balance. He was just as over no matter where he was. And that's, it's going to take time for these guys to get over, but New Japan does have a long history of, especially when it comes to things like the G1 or the Best of the Super Juniors, they bring in like an outsider to come and wrestle. I remember, like, to me as a fan, it adds a lot of interest. I remember a few years ago, Flip Gordon was in the Best of Super Juniors, and I was like, every day, just if I didn't have a lot of time, I would just watch the Flip Gordon match. And it's not because Flip Gordon I thought was better than Will Ospreay or Dragon Lee or Hiromu Takahashi or some of the top talent, but I was really interested in seeing Flip Gordon wrestle in New Japan because I had never seen him wrestle in Japan before, and I knew he was a talented but raw kind of performer, and he did really well. And I was like, it was really entertaining seeing him make that kind of growth. And that's why I would really be interested in seeing Jungle Boy in the Best of the Super Juniors, because maybe he's not as good as Hiromu, but I'd be really interested in just seeing him get a chance to have these high level matches with some of these top veteran New Japan names.
Yeah, for sure. Like even just seeing like how these guys can develop even more, because obviously they see Jungle Boy as a potential future champion, and so seeing him develop more skills, especially in that sort of New Japan style, can only help him even more. And even with like just for younger wrestlers in general, key aspect is to learn how to connect with a crowd. And I think there's no better learning skill than to try to connect with a Japanese crowd, because they're not always going to be welcoming towards you. You have to really work for it, and it's really an important skill to learn is to interact with different kinds of crowds.
Yeah, and the style of wrestling is very different. Like I said, like, if you're gonna come out there and you're gonna work an AEW, AEW is basically an extension of the American independent wrestling style, which is a lot of high flying, a lot of dives, a lot of plunder style matches. And I say that not I like all those things, so it's not a judgment; it's just a reality. New Japan has a more, especially for the younger talent. Obviously, the Young Alliance, it's all fundamentals. It's all, much more basic stuff, but also a lot more like putting a lot more of effort into your comebacks, showing that fire, your facial movements, the selling, all of that stuff that maybe isn't always pushed on the independent scene. And AEW, I'm sure, has a little bit more focus because they have a lot of veteran talent and coaches and all that stuff, as opposed to the independents when you're mostly just kind of on your own. But it's just stuff you can learn and pick up. Like, you're right, learning to work in front of the Japanese crowd is different experience, and it will give you a different kind of skill set and help you develop a different kind of skill set that will help you in the United States, even though the crowds are different, because you might learn more about how to sell. You might learn more about how to put real fire and emotion into your comeback. You might learn more about, having to visually and physically do everything as opposed to, getting a promo to do it. It's much more. That's one of the things about, when I first started watching New Japan, which is, I didn't know really what was going on because I didn't speak the language, so I didn't know what the commentators were saying or what the promos were. But because the storytelling is so physical and so present that you can understand when stuff is happening, even if you don't understand the language, because so much of it is based on physical movement and emotion. And it's just a different type of style, and I think that is beneficial to AEW talent.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. What was it you were looking up before?
I got it right here. So I just wanted to look up. I wanted to look up the the latest World Tag League, and just look at the tag teams that were in that. Which this was just in December in New Japan, and then compare that to like AEW's tag team division, and just look at the kind of difference when it comes to establishing real teams. So I want to pull up the AEW the tag team battle royal they had. Oh no, that's not the right. Bear with me here for just 1 second. Here we go. All right, so this is the World Tag League, the 2021 World Tag League. These are the tag teams. So Juice Robinson and David Finlay, who I guess are a real tag team. Finjuice, they've been tagging kind of regularly for a while. Tamatanga and Tagaloa, the Girls' Destiny. Okay, they're a real tag team. Taichi and Zaki Sabre, I don't know what I call them, just call them Zaki Sabre Jr., but Zack Sabre Jr., Dangerous Techers. They're a real tag team. And then you got just kind of guys who are in stables together but are not really established tag teams, which is basically what New Japan does when it needs to fill out the real World Tag, the World Tag League. Shingo and Sanada, Tomohiro Ishii and Toru Yano, Goto and Yoshihashi, Great-O-Khan and Jeff Cobb, Bad Luck Fale and Chase Owens, Evil and Yujiro Takahashi, and then Tanahashi and Toa Hanare. So it's really just you have the real tag teams kind of finished in the top of the standings, but then the rest of it, it's just not like it's bad talent, but it's just guys thrown together because we need people to do this. Now, I'm looking at this is the Battle Royal that AEW had for the number one contenders tag team championship spot. This excludes the Young Bucks, who are obviously the champions, but you have three versions of the Inner Circle. You have Chris Jericho and MJF. You have Jake Hager and Sammy Guevara, who are obviously just a thrown together tag team. And then you have Santana Ortiz. You have a couple versions of the Dark Order. You have Evil Uno and Stu Grayson. And you also have Alex Reynolds and John Silver, who even are both real tag teams who have been tagging for like 10 years, respectively, each. So even though they're kind of the generic Dark Order teams, they're both like well-established, long-time tag team partners. You got Private Party. You've got the Acclaimed, you've got Top Flight, you've got Jurassic Express. I said the Young Bucks weren't in it, but they totally were. I'm sorry. I forgot they were in it, even though it was a number one contendership battle royal. But my point is you have all these tag teams, and that's not even including FTR or Butcher and the Blade or the Lucha Brothers or some of these other tag teams that weren't even, I guess, able to make this battle royal. That's just that's such a deep division compared to the World Tag League, which are like a few tag teams, and then just these guys all thrown together. Like in the future, next year, you have those 3 or 4 established New Japan teams, but give me some of these AEW teams and get them into Japan, because I would love to see them work the World Tag League, which is so often just kind of a write-off. Like, you don't have to really watch it, you don't have to pay attention to it, it's not really that big of a deal. Like, I'd be so much more motivated to see it if they had these AEW teams in there, because it would be a unique experience to watch them work with the Japanese teams, and it would be fun to see them in this very structured competition where they're the G1 for tag teams, which is what the World Tag League is. And that's just one example I'm just seeing of a talent exchange that I would love to see happen, because I think AEW can really help New Japan in that regard. And I think New Japan can help AEW by giving these tag teams a new platform and a new style to experiment with.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the only worry about this talent exchange is what happens with the women's divisions, because like AEW very notoriously does not doesn't really seem to put an emphasis on the women's division. The whole Japanese bracket, it's gonna be all on YouTube, and even on Dynamite, they didn't really promote it that much. They just said, "Oh, it's a thing. It's gonna be on YouTube," and then so like right, putting on YouTube right away just makes it feel like less than probably than
Yes.
what it should be. And then obviously like we'll put a tape show on a live program, but still, like, you could try to do something at the very least. And even then, what you've seen with Impact so far, they haven't really done a talent exchange with the Impact women's division so far, which is, very good right now. I don't know if that's just all like, oh, they're on their taping schedule and they want to bring talents over right now, but still, like, what's with the women's division, because are they going to do promote with Stardom? How's that going to affect their relationship with Tokyo Joshi Pro? There's so many things going on with the women's division that like it's so all up in the air right now.
Yeah, I actually think AEW's done like a pretty good job with their women's division over the last like 2 months. I think it was really hard
Sure.
when they were dealing with injuries. Obviously, like Britt Baker being injured was a big problem. Chris Statlander being injured was a big problem. Baker's back. I think Statlander. I don't know what her actual status is. She's around all the time because she's in every
Mhm.
BTE, so she's like flying into Jacksonville and stuff. But I expect. I'm trying to remember when she got injured. I can't remember, but it feels like she's been out. She's been out for like 6 or 7 months. It feels like at least. She obviously had a very severe injury, but yeah, I mean it's a good point. New Japan Pro Wrestling as an organization is not going to provide a platform for women's wrestling or a talent exchange in any way. Stardom, which is owned by the same company as New Japan Pro Wrestling, obviously, I'm sure would be open to having their talent appear and vice versa, because Stardom has absolutely no problem bringing all sorts of foreign talent. They do it all the time for tours. It feels like every women's wrestler on the independents that has a name is like had a tour with Stardom at some point. Like it's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
said,
for
like,
sure.
yeah, they toured Stardom. Like the Stardom, it just is a churn for these kind of talents. But that raises an interesting question about where is the relationship with New Japan and AEW? Is it like, a Rocky Romero and Tony Khan relationship where Tony's working with Rocky Romero, who Rocky is kind of like a de facto liaison for New Japan talent in America?
Mhm.
Um, does Rocky have any control over Stardom talent, exchanges, or is that a completely different division? I don't know if Gato doesn't book Stardom, so like, does he have control, or is it the New Japan president? Is he the guy? Then maybe that's the guy you talk to. So I don't know that. I think, I mean, they obviously have a ton of connections in Japanese pro wrestling. Just looking at that bracket, it's a diverse talent pool. You've got people from Tokyo Joshi Pro. You've got some freelancers in there. You've got AEW contractor wrestlers like Riho. Although it's funny that Riho was in Japan forever, because of the pandemic. In, is finally gonna be back on AEW television, but she's gonna be in America because she finally came to America right as the same time AEW started running some shows some matches in Japan. I think the women's tournament matches were, I believe they've been taped already, or at least some of them have already been taped already, and they were taped at the Ice Ribbon Dojo in
Yep.
like a closed set. I don't know. I didn't expect those matches to be on American television. Maybe the finals they'll put on the American television, but I can understand why you would not want to put a closed circuit, no fans uh, match on American television with when you're competing for viewers every night. I really, really do not want to see Jim Ross like call one of those matches if we're talking about a commentary team. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it on television, but that's all beside the point. But you do raise a good point about the relationships between Stardom and like AEW having like simultaneous appears to having some form of a working relationship with like 400 different Joshi promotions right now,
Mhm.
in what that can mean for a talent. Um, One of the most probably arguably the most interesting thing about this whole working relationship would be the political nature of booking and who's going to go over when these wrestlers face each other and how that is going to work, because I think it's a very poignant question to ask. When New Japan and Ring of Honor had their relationship, which I don't know if they still have it or not. I think well, like people like Jeff Cobb are like have like kind of dual contracts and such. So they are using, and it did appear that they were actually going to use more New Japan talent in some of their announced shows before the pandemic hit, but I don't know where that stands right now. That's a total mystery to me. But when New Japan and Ring of Honor were, exchanging talent pretty regularly and having a lot of New Japan talent on the Ring of Honor shows, New Japan, like, always, their top guys always won. They always went over the Ring of Honor talents. They were always protected and pushed. It was not a 50-50 relationship. And Ring of Honor was willing to accept that because the New Japan stars, especially guys like AJ Styles, were really big stars, and you would want them to come over and be on your show, and they helped, set gate records, and they helped do all of that stuff. So you would accept that because, you would, our guys are losing, but, these guys are coming in and we're doing great business, so it's okay, if Jay Lethal loses his match. But, it's AEW, it's different. The companies are much more on a level playing field. They're much more equals than the New Japan and Ring of Honor relationship is. So if we do get that Kenny Omega versus Kota Ibushi match, like, who's going to go over? What if they're both champions at the same time, Jason? Who's going to go over? Who, like, that is a real political issue, and you cannot end the match like on a DQ or a count out. It's not the old days where you could, do that kind of style match where no one does the job. Like, people demand, results. And I don't know, how that relationship is going to happen. New Japan is very protective of their top guys. They don't like to, they're not jobbing out Okada. They don't like job out Tanahashi. Now they kind of do, but they're not going to job out these guys to anyone really, unless they're their top stars. And AEW is kind of the same way. They're not jobbing out Jon Moxley or Kenny Omega or Cody. Those guys, AEW keeps track of their records. We can see exactly how well they're doing, and it's quite well. So how that works politically will be very interesting because both sides are going to want to protect their top names. And if you want to put together these dream matches and you want to get fans excited about it, they're going to have those top names work against each other. And that becomes a very interesting political situation.
Yeah, for sure. You can't end it on a time limit draw either. That, that's not going to work out. You can't have an hour-long match and have nothing happen.
Well, you could. You just need to have a rematch with a clean finish, but.
Well, yeah. Exactly. Well, that probably won't. And so, right now, AEW, when we're recording this, AEW has this belt collector story with Kenny Omega. And so the logical reasoning would be that Omega wins the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. But then for New Japan, I don't think they want the same thing. Jon Moxley over again, where their championship is held hostage, more or less, because they can't do anything with it. And they don't want a Brock Lesnar situation from before, where the champion doesn't defend the belt ever. Just never on New Japan programming. Because obviously, AEW, they want Kenny Omega. He's an AEW talent now. He's not New Japan anymore, and so they want him on AEW television. And so I don't know if New Japan will play along with that story, the whole belt collector thing. Maybe Impact would, but just because Impact is Impact, they're not on the level of those.
It's similar
companies.
to the Ring of Honor and New Japan relationship. Like, they're like, yes, we'll definitely work with you. You want to beat our top guy? Here you go. We'll job him out. It's just a bit from a business relationship. Yeah, it's a good point about. I think the Jon Moxley Kenta match is really interesting to me because I think it's been a problem for New Japan that Jon Moxley, has the United States Championship and he's not in Japan defending it, and he can't get into Japan to defend it. And so you would think, well, they found a way to get the belt off him. He's definitely, they can do it with Kenta, and then Kenta can bring it to Japan and defend it in Japan and all that kind of stuff. But now that you have this working relationship with AEW, and that Moxley apparently can wrestle matches on New Japan Strong, and you can have New Japan wrestlers come in and wrestle Jon Moxley on AEW, it wouldn't surprise me if Moxley wins, because if Moxley retains his, here's an idea for you, right? Moxley retains the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship. And like I forget the dates, like February 20 something is when they're gonna have that match.
Mm-hmm.
He retains that title. He wrestles Kenny Omega for the AEW Championship on March 7th, Revolution. He loses that title, but then he starts a feud on AEW television over the IWGP United States Championship um, with New Japan talent. And when I think of New Japan talents that live in the United States, I think of Jay White. And so you could have Jay White work a program with John Moxley weekly on AEW Dynamite, and maybe White beats Moxley for the title. It gives Moxley something to do on AEW television once he's out of the title picture, which is what we talked about earlier. You can't have him feud with, the same top guy over and over again. And you can bring in a New
Mm-hmm.
Japan talent like Jay White to break that up. And then Jay White can get something out of the feud. He can beat John Moxley, and he can go back to Japan and bring the title, back to Japan. The IWGP United States Championship was created for New Japan's presence in the United States. It was not created to just be another title that's in Japan, right? It
Yeah.
was the tournament at the Long Beach shows with, Kenny Omega being the first champion, and it's mostly been held by American or Canadian wrestlers. So the problem of the past year has been New Japan hasn't been able to work with the champion because the champion, works for an American promotion. But now that we've gotten those kind of political differences aside, and Moxley can do work for New Japan, and you can have New Japan talent on AEW television, I think it's almost a no-brainer to keep the IWGP US Championship on AEW television. It helps New Japan a ton, and you can bring in your different stars to come in and challenge. They could do Tama Tonga. He could come in too, and he could wrestle on AEW. Like I'm not ready to punt on the idea that we got to get the title off of Moxley because the title needs to go back to Japan. The title's for American audiences. It's not for the Japanese audience. It helps, I'm sure people in Japan are interested in the matches, but it's for the American audience, and I would not punt on an opportunity to keep that title on American television, especially on a show like Dynamite that does, really well by cable standards.
Yeah, obviously, if the option is there, of course, Kenta is not booked for next week's Dynamite, and so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're just waiting until like the match happens at the end of February to really move on to what they're gonna do with Kenta in terms of AEW perspective. But yeah, if the option presents itself, I think that's a really good idea. But obviously, I think that the match will be a good tell of how far this AEW New Japan relationship is. If John Moxley does retain on that New Japan Strong show, I think that's a really good indication of okay, this is a real work relationship. They can really do talent exchange, and political differences have, for the most part, been put aside. At least from like Tony Khan and like the other New Japan executives. I don't know about the whole Young Bucks thing or whatever. That's another story. But if Kenta does win, I think that's a good indication that like okay, this is probably just a one-time thing that they did of these past 2 weeks, and like we're gonna just have to wait a little bit longer for something bigger to happen. That match is going to be a good tell of how far Japan AEW relationship really is.
Yeah, that's a really good point about that kind of being a decision day for is this just a one-time thing? And it's very possible that it could be. I mean, this was a tough political situation to get over. That's why it took a long time for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And feelings could be hurt at any time. It could be still a sensitive situation, and this could end up, falling apart at any time. If that happens, I think we're no worse off than we were before as wrestling fans, where they had no relationship. So if that's the worst case scenario, is these guys get pissed off and they stop working with each other again? Well, that's where we were before, so we didn't really lose anything.
Mm-hmm.
That we, but yeah, no, it's definitely a reasonable point to kind of say like this could just be a one-time deal. It could just be a way for them to get the title off of Moxley, which they've been trying to do, and for whatever reason they were able to relent and get it on television. I mean, I think they put Kenta over. Kenta won that match. Obviously, Omega got the pin, but Kenta wasn't like this guy who didn't get any offense in or anything like that. I guess Lance Archer was really the star of the match, but Kenta was a close second. They put him over. And look, New Japan said, AEW said that they've always been open to working with people. They're not, they're not working. They're interested in working with every wrestling promotion that wants to work with them. They're not looking to be restrictive about that. And like I said, that's like a refreshing element to wrestling. I think New Japan, because the executive vice presidents of the company were former New Japan talent who left the company really not under the best terms, and we've speculated about what those terms could be, but we just know it wasn't very like a positive ending for those guys. It was a weird political situation, and it probably still is. And we can wish cast all we want on these talent exchanges and these dream matches, but it could end up at any time. So with that cheery thought on this, when I said this was going to be a fun podcast, you got anything else you want to say about this?
Well, I just wanted to, just add that in there just to temper expectations, just, I don't want, we will also get very excited, but, I also want people to be disappointed if nothing happens. Like, happens, don't be too disappointed because, yeah, obviously it's a net neutral of, because we were in the same place before. But I guess one more thing to add, apparently, if you only time to talk to Rocky Romero, like Tony, you're a billionaire. You have the financial resources to talk to whoever you want. I would presume as billionaires do.
Well,
I think you can talk to Kadani whenever you want.
Well, so the story with that is, and this is stuff that's been reported by like Dave Meltzer and some other people. So I'm not like saying this is exactly 100% what happened, but people in New Japan, Harold May, for starters, did not believe in AEW being as successful as it would be. They thought, the idea was that these guys, you guys are going to leave and you're going to start your own wrestling promotion and you got some guy who's going to pay for it. Like, good luck. They did not take it seriously enough. And I think on that, before Wrestle Kingdom, in 2019, Wrestle Kingdom 13, right? The last kind of appearances for the Elite in New Japan. Look, they wanted a working relationship. AEW's wanted a working relationship with New Japan since the get-go. And I believe they wanted Tony Khan to come to Japan and meet with them.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Khan did not do that. I don't know. He's a busy guy. Didn't have time to fly to Japan. He sent Chris Harrington, who I forget. He's a vice president of something. I don't know. He's the data guy. Chris Harrington, former WrestleNomics fame, is an executive with the company. He sent Chris Harrington, and he sent his entire fleet of executive vice presidents to meet with New Japan to talk to them. But I do think that they were not happy with, particularly Harold May, were not happy that Tony didn't show up in Japan to talk to them. They didn't take it, and that kind of led them to not taking it as seriously. And in New Japan's, in hindsight, they dropped the ball. They should have taken New Japan. They should have taken AEW more seriously. Because they clearly are, much more sustainable and successful than I think a lot of people anticipated it to be. And that, I think, was kind of started the frostiness between the promotions, particularly between Harold May and Tony Khan, because, they wanted Tony Khan to come and, I guess, kiss the ring, and Khan, blew them off or didn't go to Japan like they wanted him to. And they said, well, this guy's, not, he's not, it's not real. Like if Tony went to Japan and talked to him, I got this and this, I've got a TV deal with TNT, because this is all behind the scenes stuff. They're not, holding a press conference with, this is all public. But if he went to Japan and said, look, this is me, look how much money I have, look at how much, we got a deal with TNT. We already signed this guy. I've got all of this kind of going on for me. I think New Japan might've been more convinced and been like, okay, we understand, we're interested in being involved in this. May left the company. AEW has now a track record of success, and now New Japan is probably like, okay, we're willing to work with you guys. And, people had hurt feelings, especially, the Bucks and Kenny have been kind of open about like saying that we weren't really happy at the end of New Japan because we didn't think we were treated appropriately. And so all of that goes into why this relationship took so long to develop.
Yeah, I mean, just yeah, but like, he's a billionaire. From what I know about billionaires, they
Yes.
they kind of just let things go, and yeah, and so that's just my big point there.
Yeah. Like we said, we don't know like specifically about why this thing took so long. I'm just going by what some reports have said. I think it makes sense. Look, we talked about this on the CM Punk podcast last week. Like Punk, like originally, like didn't think AEW was a serious place. Like they
Hmm.
wanted AEW wanted Punk. They probably made an offer for him, and I think Punk was like, "Oh yeah, you guys are gonna start. You guys got a billionaire backer, and you guys are gonna start a wrestling promotion. Like, good luck. Like, you guys aren't. No one thought. It's very never really happened before in wrestling for a grassroots company to just kind of spring up like that. So, um, like he didn't believe it, and a lot of people didn't. I think New Japan is the same way. It's like, oh yeah, if they went to WWE, they would accept that these guys went to WWE because had been an established path. When they said, oh yeah, we got this guy who's a billionaire, or at least the son of a billionaire, who's gonna start this wrestling promotion, and we're not gonna work, we're not going to WWE, and we're not staying here. We're gonna start this new thing. I was okay, go ahead and do that. Like people within the industry and wrestlers themselves, there are a lot of rumors that go around when you're in the industry that, oh yeah, this guy's got financial backing and he's going to start this company. It's something that you hear a lot. It never comes to fruition. This was like the one time that it actually did, and people really weren't prepared for it in the industry. I know in WWE, they thought the company it was totally gonna flop. They did not believe at all that that was going to be sustainable. They thought that it was just going to be like, the Triple H, that pissant company, like that was some truth to, I know part of it, I think, was him kind of in character, but I think that's how they felt. They're like, there's no way these guys who never ran wrestling promotion before are just going to run a successful wrestling promotion. It's going to flop hard. It's going to be uh, at best TNA, but even TNA had, originally Jerry Jarrett was involved, and Jerry Jarrett was at the very least a very successful wrestling promoter in the territory days. But now we're getting downhill. It's getting kind of long, so I want to cut it off. But I think we're all excited about this. We're trying to temper our expectations a little bit. I do get a kick out of fantasy booking things. And I think just over the next year, we're going to see a fun, exciting developments in wrestling. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Yep, same here.
Yep. So appreciate everyone who's been tuning in. I know our last episode has been our most viewed episode, which is relatively speaking. But I'm happy about people who have consistently decided to come back and keep listening to us, and hope that trend continues. And again, comment, like, subscribe to the channel. We'll have more content coming up in the coming weeks. I appreciate the support. So everyone have a great weekend, and we will see you in a little while.